All right. So we meet today on unceded lands all over Australia and acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders past, present and emerging. On behalf of Victoria, on behalf of Writers Victoria, I'd like to acknowledge that our offices are on Wurundjeri and Bunurong or Bunurong land, and I want to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I work remotely for Writers Victoria, so I am actually on Gunai-Kurnai country, the Briarkalong people of the Gunai-Kurnai country, and I'd like to pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. I would like to welcome especially any First Nations people in the room with us today and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and we are all on stolen lands. So today we will be hearing about the Introvert's Guide to Self-Promotion with our fantastic staff member, Jeanie Watson, who I will now introduce. Jeanie is the Marketing and Communications Manager at Writers Victoria. Jeanie is a freelance copywriter and content writer. She has experience in communications and publishing roles within the arts, not-for-profit, health and government sectors in Australia and New Zealand. She holds a BA in Communications, Professional Writing, and a diploma in Book Editing and Publishing. Her career began as an editor for the National Museum of Australia and National Gallery of Australia before she moved into magazine publishing and strategic communications and marketing roles. So, thank you very much for giving us this prezzo today, Jeanie. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Jess. That's fantastic. Welcome, everyone. It's lovely to see you all. I will start by just sharing my screen so we can start this presentation because I'm aware that you've all got, you're slotting this into your lunch times. So just hang on a sec while I share my screen with you. Can everyone see that all right?
Yep.
Great. Fantastic. Wonderful. So welcome to today's session on the Introvert's Guide to Self-Promotion. My name is Jeanie. I'm the Marketing Communications Manager at Writers Victoria, as Jess just said. And I'm really pleased to see how many people have showed up today. I have to say it's a pretty impressive turnout. This topic clearly resonated with many people. So I hope that the first thing you realise is how you're not alone when it comes to feeling like you needed a bit of hand figuring out how to promote yourself when you identify as an introvert. So today we've got a couple of exercises that we'll do in the presentation. I've allowed some time at the end for questions, so if you can just hold on to them until the end, we'll have time to talk about them later. You can always pop them in the chat as we go along so you don't forget them. And you might want to make some notes as well as we go along, or you can also pop your answers in the chat as well. So what we'll be covering today is we'll be talking about introverts, obviously. I wanted to start by reflecting on some of our strengths and qualities, and in particular, the key difference between introverts and extroverts when it comes to self-promotion. We'll be talking about taking a moment to think about what's stopping you from promoting yourself and your writing. And this will lead into a conversation about some of the common barriers that we have when it comes to self-promotion and how to overcome them. I'll share some simple ways to rethink self-promotion and then look at how you can begin promoting your writing and yourself as a writer. Then I'll talk about some ideas and opportunities, including a few examples of what some other writers are doing these days. And as I said before, there'll be time to talk about questions at the end. So here's a little bit more about me. So I consider myself a fellow introverted writer, and the reason I chose this topic was kind of like a self-help presentation. All of these things I'm going to share with you today are things I personally struggle with. So we're going to face them together. I'm a pretty reluctant participant on social media, but I also believe that good things happen when you get outside of your comfort zone. For those of you who haven't heard of Susan Cain, she wrote a wonderful book called Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. She's also done a TED talk called The Power of Introverts, which you might want to look up. And I think this quote really sums up one of the key messages of my talk today. So this talk is not about curing introversion. And I'll be really honest, there isn't a secret pathway to self-promotion for introverts. So the options for self-promotion are the same, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. Instead, I'm here to encourage you to celebrate your strengths, identify your barriers to self-promotion, and explore ways to promote yourself that feel right for you or that come more naturally to you. So you'll be familiar with these ideas and differences between introverts and extroverts. And I acknowledge that these aren't hard and fast rules. It's all about people's preferences and experiences, and they all exist within a spectrum. But if you have a look, extroverts tend to be more energized by the outside world, whereas introverts are more energized by their inner worlds. Extroverts tend to be more outgoing and talkative, whereas introverts tend to be more inward and quiet. You can think of extroverts as valuing the breadth of their experiences, whereas introverts often value the depth of their experiences. And I think this last point is very important. So extroverts tend to act first and think later, whereas introverts tend to think first and they may act. I think as introverts, we generally prefer to spend a lot of time thinking and contemplating, but the key is not to get stuck in the contemplation stage. You must take action. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time thinking about the reasons that are stopping you from promoting yourself. So I thought you could take a moment to write down the top reason or couple of reasons why you feel like you can't or don't want to promote yourself and your writing. You can write this down for yourself, or you can pop it in the chat if you like. We can talk about some of those later. I think your answers to this question will reveal your barriers and lead into that next slide that I'll be talking about. So I'll give you a bit of time to have a think about what's stopping you. Okay, so I've made a guess as to what you will write down or what might be the things that are stopping you, and I'll go through them now. So these are some of the barriers I think we face when it comes to promoting ourselves. One is fear of judgment or worrying about what other people think. Two is imposter syndrome, which is where you feel like you're not good enough or have the right experience or expertise. Comparison is where you look at others and perhaps feel intimidated by what they're doing or like you can't compete with it. 4 is fear of failure, and funnily enough, there is also something called fear of success, which I think is the fear of failure is fairly self-explanatory. Fear of success can be another way we kind of stop ourselves from doing something in case something really great happens. We might be scared of what that might mean. And then lack of time, which is fairly self-explanatory. I think it's something that a lot of writers relate to in terms of finding time for their actual writing, let alone time for self-promotion. And then general overwhelm is where I think you don't know how or where to begin, and you just need to figure out where to start. So the first 4 barriers are fear-based, and they're a little bit harder to overcome. They're more internal barriers. This is where your inner critic or even your imaginary outer critics are getting in the way of you pursuing your writing dreams. Just as an example, when I asked my partner what he thinks of when he hears the word self-promotion, he said, arrogant, obnoxious Trump. So I think he has a certain barrier when it comes to promoting himself, and that is around his perception of people who promote themselves. He doesn't want to come across as someone who is boastful and inauthentic, but I think that is his understanding of what self-promotion is a very negative one, and I don't think that it's actually true. We don't have time today to delve into these internal barriers, but if you have identified one or any of these as your barrier, I recommend you spend some time researching ways to overcome it. It may be helpful to seek out another perspective on what your barrier is. You could talk to someone you trust or another writer you admire about your fears. Most fears are just stories we've created in our own minds. And as writers, we're very compelling storytellers, but we shouldn't always believe the stories that we tell ourselves. The last two, lack of time and general overwhelm, are more practical barriers. You may struggle to find enough time to write, as I said, let alone time to promote what you've written. And the key for this one, I think, is to start small and try one thing at a time, and see, as it'll grow over time. The last barrier, which is the general overwhelm, is for those of you who don't know where or how to start. This is what I'll be focusing on for the rest of the presentation. So I think what I want you to remember is that it's not about you at the end of the day. Self-promotion is about your readers. It's about communicating, and it's about sharing information. So it doesn't have to be about boasting or selling yourself in a way that doesn't come naturally. I think thinking about self-promotion in this way has helped me prepare for this presentation. I stopped focusing on me and instead wanted to focus on you, my audience, and how I might be able to help you. This helped me get past any feelings of self-consciousness, doubt, and fear of judgment. So just a reminder, it's not about you, it's about your readers. By focusing on sharing your writing with them and connecting with them and other fellow writers, this will help you move past your barriers to self-promotion. So I wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about where you begin if you wanted to start promoting yourself. I've used a similar structure for this as any communication strategy would have. There's a bit of a plan and a bit of thinking that goes into it. And the thing that you would start with is understanding why you want to promote yourself or your writing. I think it's really important to work out your why before you decide how and what and who you're going to be promoting yourself to. I think for most of you, it will come down basically to wanting to share your writing with others. It'll be a very straightforward why. Others might have a more specific why. It might be that you've got a self-published book that you have organised book signings for, and you want to tell people about where they can go to find you to have their book signed or to buy their copies of your book. That's a different sort of why. That's a very specific why. But as writers, we have an intrinsic need to share our work with others. So once you know what your motivation is, you can start to plan what you're going to share. The next step is to think specifically about what you want to share. So it could be a short story, it could be poetry or an essay. It might be, you want to build your author profile a bit more generally. So being clear about what you want to promote will help you figure out exactly how you're going to do it and the best way to do it. The who is about who you're wanting to reach. So again, being clear about who you're trying to reach will help you decide how you're going to do it. If your writing is of a certain genre, for example, think about where you might find and connect with readers of that genre. The how is the practical side of how you're going to get your writing out there and to connect with others. I'll talk more about this one in the following slides. because there are lots of options out there at the moment, which probably leads to some general overwhelm. When is about committing to taking action. So once you've decided on your how, I recommend you commit to taking action as soon as possible, even before you feel really ready. So here are some ideas and opportunities. So the next few slides will really focus on the how you can get out there and help connect people to your writing and to you as a writer. I've kind of split them into online versus in-person opportunities, and naturally there will be some crossover. Obviously, social media is a very popular and generally easy way to connect with others and share what you're comfortable sharing. I've included some statistics. These are from January this year, and they relate to the percentage of internet users between the ages of 16 and 64 who use each platform each month in Australia. So this gives you an idea of where people are. Generally, this is not a specific statistics around where readers or writers are hanging out, but it'll tell you that there's still quite a significant number of people using Facebook in Australia. The next most popular platform is Instagram, then TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, and LinkedIn. I think obviously there are other platforms that I haven't mentioned here. You know, there's the recently launched Threads, which is similar to Twitter, but this will give you a sense of where people are. I think it's important to note that something like LinkedIn, for example, where you may think it's just a professional platform where you talk about your work and your professional achievements. I think it has evolved over time, and it might be somewhere that is a bit more open to showing the other side of your life. If you're writing as a hobby or in your spare time, which many of you will be, there's definitely an opportunity to mention on LinkedIn that that you are writing something and sharing that with people who you're connected with, if you think that that would be something they'd be interested in. It just shows a different side of you, and there are definitely writers hanging out on LinkedIn these days as well. So it's just another channel for promotion, really. So these are some examples that I've just pulled of some Instagram accounts for writers. I don't know these writers personally, or if they even consider themselves introverts, but it gives you some ideas of what kind of content writers share. The first one is Eloise Grills, whose graphic novel Big Beautiful Female Theory was shortlisted for this year's Stella Prize. On her socials, Eloise shares art, writing, promotes her book, promotes events, and also talks about her life in general. The next is poet Manisha Anjali. This screenshot shows a post in which she invites people to sign up to her newsletter, which is a great way to stay in direct contact with your readers. If you decided to have a newsletter sign up list on maybe on your website, on your own website, your author website, it gives you a little bit more control in terms of staying in touch with your readers. And that's what she's inviting people to do. And the last is Ali Parker, who is currently in the throes of promoting her upcoming debut novel, At the Foot of the Cherry Tree. Ali is using TikTok and Instagram to generate interest and get a lot of pre-orders. And if you check her out, she's got some really great videos helping to promote her book. So these are just some examples of what's happening out there. But I think one of the things is a really good tip for if you're thinking about social media and if you're interested in it and you feel comfortable sharing information about yourself or your writing on social media, think about who you're already following, check out your favorite authors and see what they're up to. And that will give you some ideas. Some authors just purely share information about their writing. Others have a more of a mixed profile where they share a bit about their writing and a bit about their lives. It just always comes back to, I think, what you're most comfortable doing. Staying in the online world, which some of you may feel more comfortable doing, it's still writing in a way. You can blog, you can guest blog for someone else's blog site. You can have a newsletter, either as part of your blog or author website, or you can use something like Substack, where it's a newsletter platform, which means people can follow you and you can send updates to them directly. Gives you a little bit more control of your content, I guess, rather than going through one of the major platforms. Or you can create your own author website if that's where you're up to. And there's plenty of advice and information online about how to go about setting up your own author website. I think one really great way to promote yourself, which may not be something you think of very often, is actually submitting your work to competitions or publications. Having something published puts your work in front of readers. It gets your writing recognised by the industry, and it makes for newsworthy content that you can share from your own socials or website. So it's always something to keep an eye out for if your writing would suit a competition, or would be if you're going to a literary journal, or sending something through as a submission. And of course, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't include a plug for Writers Victoria. I know most of you here today are current members. I hope that you are already very familiar with the ways that we can help you promote yourself and your writing. But I will send an email to you all on Monday with a handout of helpful links and opportunities, just in case you need reminding or you just weren't aware of some of the things that we offer to our members. I wanted to talk next about just one author who I thought I'd profile here, and that is Alice Pung. She is an author and Writers Victoria tutor. And in terms of, I just really love this quote that I came across. She was being interviewed for Why Write with Noi Hartzell, who was our chair, who's recently stepped back into a role of director with the Writers Victoria board. And Alice was talking about how she grew up as an introvert. And she says, I'm still quite introverted. I've got a lot better at this now at speaking, but I wasn't very good at talking to anybody as a young person and even as an emerging adult. The wonderful young adult author John Green said, an introvert is someone who usually has a story that they're burning to tell you, but they don't want to look you in the eye while they're telling you that story. The written word is something I'm much more comfortable with than the spoken word. So that was Alice talking about how she feels as an introvert. But having said all of this, it hasn't stopped her from being a very successful author. She has an author website, but she's not on Instagram or Twitter. She seems to have quietly quit Facebook, as she hasn't updated her page since 2022. So I think, she's gone on to publish a dozen books. She's received many awards and recognition. And I noticed she even has a speaking section on her website. So it's just good to see that someone, you can evolve and get more comfortable doing things over time. The next one I wanted to talk about is opportunities for in-person interaction and opportunities to talk to others about what you're doing. And I think a really nice place to start for those of you who aren't really sure and feel a little bit hesitant is to think about your existing communities and networks first, where you do feel comfortable. So your friends, family, work colleagues, social groups, and so on. I think they will be interested in hearing what you're up to. And those conversations can lead to other things. So I think it's just be mindful that you've probably already got some really great connections and opportunities to talk about your writing. The next one around connecting with readers. I think, you know, as writers, it's really good to be where your readers are and to have conversations and meet people, sort of meet like-minded people. So when I talk about connecting with readers, I mean, go to literary events, go to book launches at bookshops or writers' festivals. Your local library probably has a lot of events where they've got other authors speaking. They may, you know, it's an opportunity to speak if you are an author and you have a book that you'd like to promote. Libraries, you can approach libraries and ask them. Even joining a book club, again, it's just immersing yourself in that world of readers and connecting with others and sharing what you're up to. You never know who you might end up meeting and speaking with. I also think connecting with other writers is a great idea as well. You can follow them, you can learn from them, you can see what they've done that's been successful, and they can help you, guide you on your own writing journey. So I think there's also a really important message around taking the time to celebrate and support other writers. This applies to both online and in person. You know, you can, if you don't want to talk about yourself necessarily, you can always share the book that you're reading or some thoughts about the book that you're reading. You can promote your favorite author. It's always good to be generous. So we're reaching the end of my formal presentation, but I wanted you to do one more exercise and then we can have a good chat at the end if anyone has any questions. So the one thing I wanted you to all to do is, now that you've had a think about, you know, what is stopping you, what small steps you could take in terms of why you want to promote yourself, how you're going to do it, who you want to promote yourself to. I think it's really a powerful thing to do, to actually commit to writing down one thing that you'll do to share your writing by the end of this month. I think it's always good to make it a time sensitive promise. And if you wanted to write it down just to yourself or write it in the chat so we can witness it, that would be totally fine as well. But I think you'll just feel like you've made a promise to do something by the end of this conversation, and it'll just give you that sense of control back and a plan, which I think some of us need sometimes, to stop thinking and start acting. You know, we can see by the number of people here today that a lot of people struggle with self-promotion, perhaps introverts even more so. Identifying your key barriers to self-promotion, finding ways to work around it, and remembering that despite the word itself being self-promotion, it's ultimately not about you. If you come up with a plan, take action, and do it in a way that feels natural to you. That's my advice overall. So we'll stop now if you like and have time for questions, and I will come back to you and have a look at what's happening in the chat.
Thanks, Jeanie. Heaps of people answered your question about, you know, what's stopping you in the chat. So a fair few people may have written something as well. But yeah, lots of people actually put some interesting things in the chat. But so far, I don't see any questions. So everybody must just be saving them up in their head and is probably willing to ask you by unmuting.
That's totally fine. I'm happy to just have a chat while people are thinking about questions, because I couldn't see your chat while I was presenting. So I'm just going to look at these comments, and Inexperience, absolutely. Imposter syndrome feels wrong. Yes, if it doesn't come naturally to you to talk about yourself, I understand. But I hope that idea of, I think I come back to it as like, what if my favorite author had not shared their work with the world? You know, I would never have come across them and I would never have connected with them in that way. And I think, you know, what you are writing and have to offer, someone out there will connect with it and will benefit from it in some way. I think if you feel like it, approach it more as an altruistic act than as a necessarily very selfish act to promote yourself. I think that's a nice way to approach it. I think in terms of no one wants to read your writing, you know, I think there's a reader for every writer out there. And I think that how will you ever know unless you try? I understand the cringe factor. I feel totally awkward about it as well. But again, it's just trying to unpack why you feel that way, what's stopping you. Do you feel that way when you hear of other people sharing their work? You know, it's sometimes our judgment of others, we can reflect back on ourselves, but other people aren't thinking the same thing. Lack of confidence in self and value of work, yes. And I think that's something that, you know, taking action helps, because I think, I don't know who said it, it's a quote about the antidote, action is the antidote to despair. So I think if you know, we can overthink it so much, we don't take action. Once you start taking action, you realize there's not a huge, you know, there's no terrible consequence, and there actually might be some really great outcomes when you share it. That can help to build that confidence and for you to start to see value in your work. You don't know what to, Alex says, don't know what to do. Yes, so I hope some of those ideas gave you, some of the how gave you some ideas on what to do. Again, doing something that you feel comfortable doing, because I think at the end of the day, if you're not going to want to be on TikTok, you're not going to make time to take steps to promote yourself on TikTok. So make sure you come up with a way that you actually, it's not going to be so off-putting that you're just going to put it off for the rest of time. Choose something that you feel really comfortable doing. If you're afraid of trolls, I understand that. You know, I don't have a huge social media presence because I feel, you know, uncomfortable in that sense. So again, I think I would look for other opportunities that don't put you in the way of that sort of interaction. You know, go to small in-person events where you're more likely to have a genuine conversation and then feel it like you're in a safe space that you have some control over, that you can leave, instead of maybe social media is not for you right now, but could be later. Fear of rejection and others' negative judgment. Yes, I think they're very natural feelings. I don't think you're alone in feeling that. But I think also it's just, I think that sense you'll never know if you don't try. And maybe that would help to find a safe group of people that you can share your writing with and get some feedback from, and start to think, you know, get some valuable insights into your writing, improving your writing. And then once you feel more comfortable with it, you can share it a bit more widely. It's a distraction from writing. I totally get that. Yes, you've barely got time to write, let alone think about self-promotion, which is, I think, if that's what you're struggling with, I think, again, find something which fits in with your work, your lifestyle at the moment. So if you're on a particular social media platform that you are active on, maybe that's the place to start talking about your writing a bit more, because you're already there. You're already doing things there. You might not be talking about your writing, but you might be talking about your life in general. People don't want to be sold to. Yeah, absolutely. I understand that as well. I think if people don't want to engage with your writing, they won't. But if it's just about giving people the opportunity. If you've got a product, I suppose if you've got a book that you're trying to sell, it can feel a bit salesy, but also I think you've got a message as well within that book that you really want to share. So you're not actually selling the product. Don't think of it like that. You're not forcing someone to buy your book. You're sharing a message that you wrote. In terms of, you know, annoying people, hassling people, there are a few along the same theme. I think friends and family, it's not always the case, but mostly are supportive of, you know, people, you know, following their passions and producing work and would like to know about it. But I understand that's not always the case. It's just about finding that supportive community, I suppose, which is partly what Writers Victoria does. It offers that supportive community where you can build that confidence with a group of like-minded people. Who else have I got here?
I think people are getting into questions now.
Yep.
I'm seeing some pop up in the chat, and there's a few sort of some that sort of fit together under a few different headings.
Right.
An interesting one relating to social media, which several other people may be wondering, is whether you think planning out an approach rather than spontaneous, like spur of the moment posts, the logistics of, you know, using social media.
Yeah, I think there's a case for both sides. I'm sorry to be that person that sort of like sits on the fence, but I really do think there's a case for both sides. I have heard other writers approaching social media posts in a very structured way, and, you know, almost like planning their blog posts in one go. They'll do their social media posts in one go. So they'll plan them, they'll schedule them. And I like that idea because you do it in one go and then you set and forget. So that can be helpful if you just, you know, you want to do self-promotion, you want to send something out regularly, but you don't want to have to think about it on a daily basis. It might suit people who like to just come up with a few different post ideas. You can schedule them to come out, you know, once a week or once a month or whatever timeline you prefer. And then once you've scheduled them, they'll just go and you'll forget until people start liking them and commenting on them, and then you'll remember that you've sent a post out. Otherwise, you know, if you're more of a spur of the moment sort of person, I think that's great. I think you can do it on the hop whenever you get the urge to do it. But again, trying to remember why you're doing it can help you with how often you go out, what sort of things you talk about, which platform or channel you decide to use. That can all help if you're very clear about what you're trying to achieve. It can help reduce that feeling of, why am I doing this? Am I doing this just because I think I should, or because everyone else tells me I should? I think you have to really want to do it and come to a point where you're like, if I don't do it, I'm writing this wonderful work, but no one's going to read it unless I share it with someone.
Thanks, Jeanie. I noted something as well in the chat that you just sort of reminded me of with the scheduling things. Someone was talking about, as well as people that are just generally time poor, where scheduling would help. Someone was talking about chronic illness and disability and the dynamic nature of that, not knowing when you're going to feel well enough to devote time to making social media posts. So I guess scheduling, you know, when you're having a good day and you've got that time, I guess could be helpful for that. And in that same vein, someone asked, is it worth creating separate social media accounts? So me as the person and me as the author, versus having everything together so that your followers can see, hey, you're posting about your dog on your author page or whatever. What do you think about that, separate or together?
Look, I'm sure people have different opinions about this. Again, it comes back to how much if you've got an existing social media account where you're sharing information about yourself as a person, I think it would make sense to me to use it to promote your writing as well. If you only want to have a social media account because you want to share your book or you want to share your writing, that's fine. But I think if your barrier about you have a real barrier about promoting yourself, that social media account is going to become a bit salesy. Like it's going to feel a bit more salesy. You're going to struggle a little bit more to think of content that doesn't sound like you're constantly spruiking your book. And the only reason I'm saying this is because I've got a friend of mine who has done this. She's got her private social media accounts, and then she's got her account for her book. And she, I think, struggles to think of new ways to say the same thing. Whereas I think I went to a session with Danielle Binks, who's a writer, an author, but also a literary agent. She talked about social media for writers. It was one of the events we did in our season 1 program. And she showed examples of authors who are sharing both. And it just gives you a bit more scope, I think, for your social media account to be sharing a bit of everything if that's what you're comfortable doing, I think. And then you're only managing one account. You're not having to manage two. I think people like to know about the writer behind the book as well. So it gives your readers a bit of an insight into who you are. But that's honestly, I don't have a social media account. I'm not sharing a lot of stuff about myself online. So it's really, again, coming back to what you're comfortable with and what you're going to end up wanting to do. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and then there's a little bit in the chat where people are just talking about sharing their writing as well. So not necessarily talking about social media posts, but even just getting their writing out and sharing that with people. And you sort of mentioned maybe having a writing group of people that you feel really comfortable with and only sharing it with those few people, you know, to begin with. So I guess there are places to find writing groups on our website. I'll dig up that link for people and put it in the chat. But in terms of finding a group of people, could you use social media or like I'm thinking about the background that you're coming from, in marketing. How would you reach those people? How would you find those people to share your writing with, and find a group of trusted people? Do you have any thoughts on that?
If you're looking for people other writers to give you constructive feedback on your writing, I think a writers group is a really great place to start. We're in the middle of updating our writers groups on our website. I noticed we're just making sure that all of them have the correct up-to-date contact details. So that should be done in the next few days, but feel free to have a look on that page anyway. It's done by location, so you can find people near you that might be open for new members. I think otherwise there are other opportunities. If you want to get feedback on your writing, you can think about a mentorship, or if you've got a small piece of writing that you want to get some feedback on, Writers Victoria offers some spotlight services. So, you could get feedback on your first chapter, or you could get a manuscript assessment. But that's, that might be something that you want to think about if you've got a large document that you really want to get some constructive feedback on. But yeah, I think people are always posting about looking for groups to join. It can be one of those community groups on Facebook, or it can be just a post out to your friends and family. And if anyone's interested in starting a group, I think that you'll be surprised at how many people wanting to do the same thing that haven't actually said so. And also your library. I've got to remember your library is also a great place to start as well. They often have writers groups. So always check in with your libraries.
Yes, and librarians are always such lovely, friendly, helpful people. Even if they don't have any groups that meet at the library, they'll like have a look around for you. I find librarians are just magical people. So I think if I've missed anything in the chat that you've posted and you're still burning to ask it, please unmute yourself. I'm just going back over everything. Some of them are sort of comments rather than questions, but if anyone else has anything to ask, we've got about 10 minutes left. So please do jump in. Yeah, so again, Tracy's just asked, how do you go about getting readers other than family and friends to read your finished book? So yeah, that's about finding the beta readers and maybe try your library and yeah, and those other things you suggested. Spotlight services. Oh yes, and Kathy mentioned our spotlight services. Would you like to, if no one's jumping in with a question, would you like to tell us a bit more about those, Jeanie?
Sorry, what was that, Jess?
The spotlight services as opposed to getting a full manuscript assessment.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so we offer a range of spotlight services. They're on our website. Jess might pop a link into them while we're talking. And they are for when you don't need a full manuscript assessment. You want a little bit of feedback on maybe a first chapter, or you might have I think a submission, a publisher, you might be planning to submit to a publisher and you'd like to get some feedback on your synopsis or your cover letter. We have something, I think we call them publisher submission assessments as well. So that's a really good option as well if you're ready to go and you want to submit, but you just want to make sure that you've got the synopsis and cover letter in a good state beforehand. So they're just a really nice option for the smaller assessments that you might be looking for. And Jess has got the link in there for you. I can add it to the handout link list as well that I've got prepared that we'll send out on Monday.
Okay, thank you, Jeanie. Okay, so 10 minutes we've got time to kill. Is there anyone brave enough to unmute themselves? We're a room full of introverts, so no one's judging you. Any last questions?
I do have one last slide too before we all go.
Well, I managed to get the one about membership too, so I have one last slide as well. Knowing that most people are already members in the Zoom room, whatever. But I'll show it anyway. Well, do you want to put up your last slide then, Jeanie, if you've got one last thing to kind of talk about?
I would just like to, so I started with a Susan Cain quote, and I'd like to finish with one. But I also just want to say thank you so much for coming along. I was pretty blown away by the numbers of people who registered for this event. I really wasn't, I did this topic because it's something that I think about a lot. And I think, I find it a funny contrast in the fact that I'm a marketing communications manager. I'm meant to be feeling very comfortable about all of this. And in many ways, I'm very comfortable promoting Writers Victoria till the end of time. But when it comes to promoting myself, it's a whole different kettle of fish. And it's something that I really wanted to work through myself. And you've just been taken along for the ride, basically. So I'll just share this with you. Thank you so much for coming. And I just wanted to say finally that this is what I think is a really important quote to end on. And it's Susan saying, the secret to life is to put yourself in the right lighting. For some, it's a Broadway spotlight. For others, a lamplit desk. Use your natural powers of persistence, concentration, and insight to do work that you love and work that matters. Solve problems, make art, think deeply. And I would just say, my final comment on that is, don't think too deeply for too long. Take action, do something, you know, share your work with the world. Everyone is waiting to read it, and it's just your own, you know, you're the person stopping yourself from getting out there. Everyone else is really keen to read what you're writing. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
So I realize that most people are members. If you are not, but you have, you know, immensely enjoyed this presentation, as I imagine you all have, you can see many more of these for free. And yeah, take advantage of all the other things that we have to offer, like the things that Jeanie mentioned, like the manuscript assessments and all those things. All of those are discounted. You'll also receive discounts from some of our partners, and really, we're just a very helpful bunch of people. I just love my colleagues at Writers Victoria, and we get some very weird and wonderful questions, and we always endeavour to answer them. So yeah, look, it's worth being a member for that, if nothing else. But yes, get out there, share your writing. We would love to hear from you. We would love to see your writing. Yeah, if you're not a member, do consider joining up, because we do have some wonderful things, and we're just a wonderful writing community. You know, we're the only we've gathered all the, you know, the Victorian writers. We're the only place where we all kind of can meet as a community in Victoria. So it's really nice to have. I know there's a few regional people here from comments in the chat and stuff. So it's really nice to just have that community, if nothing else. And I just realized we have Kit here. I don't know, while I'm showing my screen, if you can see Kit, but I just realized I have been the absolute worst host. I didn't actually introduce myself. My name is Jess, and I am an online learning administrator for Writers Victoria, and Kit is a brand new online learning administrator. So if you come to more of our online sessions, our Zoom sessions, you will see more of Kit. And she's shadowing me today to see how it's done. And I realized I did an awful job because I didn't actually introduce myself to you at the beginning. So please, Kit, don't do that. But, you know, we did the acknowledgement of country, and it's been a fantastic session. And I want to thank you all for coming. It is 12:56. So if there's nothing else, we will say thank you and goodbye. Have a lovely rest of the day and a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I lost my picture.